Recording. All right. And so welcome again to Zoom into Archaeology. My name is Nicole. I'm so thrilled today to welcome Margo Stringfield from the University of West Florida Archaeology Institute. As some of you may know, Escambia County's 200th anniversary is coming up here in the next month. And so we're having a couple of presentations kind of in celebration of that anniversary. And one of the first people I, of course, reached out to was Margo, as she's been really involved with the celebration process. So welcome, Margo, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about the bicentennial. This is our territorial bicentennial, as well as Escambia County's 200th anniversary. And so I'm going to get over and get to hopefully I'm going to start here. Everyone should know that this is my first time doing this, and so I'm feeling quite...
We appreciate you branching out for us. That looks good. That looks good.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to make it... oh, well, wait a minute. Haha. Okay, I think this is actually going to go now.
You got it.
All right. Back before we had pandemic in our nation and in our world, the mayor of Pensacola and Escambia County Board of County Commissioners asked that we start looking at how we could commemorate this important date in our state's history. And it is one, it's one of many firsts that we have. We all know that we are a city of first, a state of first. And this is celebrating and commemorating when we shifted from being a colonial possession of another nation under the umbrella of the United States. So in 1821, we began the process of becoming a territory. Now, there was plenty that had happened before 1821. Of course, you have early exploration by the Spaniards. Our first Spanish period began approximately 1513 through 1763. And then we move into our short British period, and then we move back into our Spanish period. We were often the pawn in what was happening in the European theater. And so we moved back and forth from country to country. And in 1821, we came under the United States. And it was not until 1845 that we actually became a state, but we began the process in 1821. Now, a lot of people think, what the heck is the second Spanish period? What does this mean? This is how we refer to it here. But what this means is when the British left, after that brief occupation, beginning in 1781 and lasting until 1821, we have a period of time when we are back under Spanish rule. But this was also a period of time for Spain when they were experiencing great distress, both at home and abroad. They are not able to actually control their colonies. They began to lose Mexico and the Latin American colonies. And also they're seeing pressure coming in particular from the Atlantic seaboard. You're seeing American settlers that are moving into Spanish territory. They're doing so because they feel like they can, and this is open land, and also because many of them are realizing what the next step is going to be. They're realizing that what is about to happen is that Spanish Florida will be absorbed into the United States. And so what we see are the United States starting to chip away a bit at Florida. And of course, General Andrew Jackson led the charge here. And this is could very well just be called part of our manifest destiny push to start collecting more land and more territory and expanding the American frontier. Now, in second Spanish period, Pensacola, there were some Anglos here, but primarily you're looking at people that were out of Spanish, French, African tradition. You're also looking at some Anglo-Saxon, some Anglos coming in, and you're looking at what we call Creoles, which is a blend of ethnicities. And so what you're seeing here is a really diverse community during the second Spanish period of time. What happens on July 17th, after several years, we've had negotiations, we've had different treaties, but on July 17th, we actually had the formal transfer. The Spanish governor transferred Florida to Andrew Jackson. He was the first governor for a brief period of time. And so that happened here in Pensacola. Now, they had also had an exchange of flags over in St. Augustine. But this was more, and it was, well, it certainly was a formal ceremony, but this was not the official ceremony that actually transferred Florida. And but they did go over, and Andrew Jackson sent one of his military staff over to essentially make sure everything was fine over in St. Augustine. A week later, back in Pensacola, they have the formal relaying of Florida. And so this took place in Pensacola. And at the time, people are often surprised to know that there were only two counties in the new territory. One would be Escambia, and that went all the way over to the Suwannee River, which was the dividing line between Escambia County and St. Johns County. Now, these were where you had the major population concentrations. And as I say, major concentration, I mean, not many people to begin with. I mean, this, you did have people that were down in the St. Joe, Apalachicola, St. Mark's area. You did have some people down in Key West, but primarily where you had the small concentrated community was Pensacola and St. Augustine. And so what we're seeing is the very beginning of our state here as we start to build out both in population and infrastructure. And one of the major changes to our infrastructure in government is the fact that we moved from a monarchy being controlled by an authoritarian government to a democracy. And so this was a really major change for what was happening in moving from Spanish Florida to American Florida. The image that you're looking at here is a really lovely little watercolor, and this is in the UWF Historic Trust collection. And what you're looking at is a rendition of the lowering of the Spanish flag and the raising of the American flag. And this portrays downtown Pensacola. In the back, you can see the ships out in the bay. These were ships that were here to transport people away. We had the Hornet, the U.S. Navy was here, as well as some private ships that were going to take some of the Spanish officials out of Pensacola, as well as anyone else who wanted to go. And the military was very prominent in the exchange that we see in Pensacola, as well as over in St. Augustine. And what really strikes me about this image, and it may you as well, is the fact that what we're looking at in the forefront is a bunch of military men. We're seeing a very formal portrayal of actually how we have seen our history in the early days of historians writing about events. They tended to focus on either the big man or the big event. And this is not a criticism, but it is how things were written about. And we have, of course, have changed how we start looking at our history and interpreting our history. Because if you look to the back of this lovely little image, you will see that there are actually citizens way back there in the background. You can see a number of people that are vaguely portrayed back in the back of the ceremony. And these are the people that were living here, the people that had come in. And these are the people actually who had established themselves in Pensacola and been here for generations, as well as newcomers. And the story is actually more about them than it is about the military exchange of power. that we see. And when we started looking at how best we could talk about what was happening and what the dynamic was here in Pensacola, we wanted to focus not on the big man, because obviously Andrew Jackson was the big man, or the big event, which was the exchange, the formal exchange, because that was important, but what was happening all around that, what was happening with the people that were here. So we wanted to look at the people. Now, fortunately, the Spanish in 1820 had compiled a census of everyone that was here in 1820. It primarily shows the Spaniards and the French and who was living in Spanish Florida. And you do pick up some of the Americans that have moved in both into Pensacola and those that are living up in the Escambia River area, waiting to kind of move down. And it's a wonderful census. Dr. William Coker and his partner published this book, and it is chock full of information. It's not just a list of names, but it gives you occupations, it gives you ages, it gives you ethnicity and gender. It's a wonderful document that's translated from the Spanish. And we had this and we thought, well, you know, we can really take a close look at the people that were here. We can also look at other documents that we have, primary source materials, that can also tell us who might have been here at that time. And so our focus was to see what we could find out about the people. And one of the things that we did was to ask the West Florida Genealogical Society if it might be possible to identify all of the people that were here in 1821 using a variety of materials from the 1820 census on through legal documents such as wills, court cases, the voting records that existed from an early period, different proclamations that were signed, as well as the 1830 census. We thought, well, you know, if you're in that 1820 census and you show up in 1830 as well, you were here in 1821. And they have done an absolutely fabulous job of identifying somewhere in the vicinity of 2,200 people that were here in 1821. And the people that they've identified give us a sense of just how diverse our population was. It was a wonderful blend of people, and it was a blend that saw, you might see Spanish men living in households with African women, either free or enslaved with their families. It gives us a real sense of who was here, what they were doing, and in fact, who they were living next door to. And so on the bottom of the screen, you're going to see in red a link to the 1821 sampler.com. And one of the things that we're asking people to do is to send a picture of themselves in and to, honor someone from our 1821 community. You can pick someone or they'll just randomly assign you. And what this does is give face to people. It gives a voice and a face. And so this gives you a little an idea of what it's going to look like. You send your picture in and you click on your picture and you see you click or you see the name, and then you click again, it shows you and it tells you about the person you're representing. It's a really wonderful way to connect our community. We are all standing next to each other. We are all part of the same community. We are all Floridians. And this is a beautiful project, and I'm hoping, and as is everyone that's involved with the commemoration, that people will indeed join in and represent someone from the 1821 community in the sampler, the 1821 sampler. You can go online. It's going to tell you about the sampler. It's going to tell you how to search the database of information. It's going to tell you what different terms mean in the census. And so I think you'll have a nice time just looking at it and hopefully participating. So one of the things we wanted to do was just look at the people and find out about the people and what they might have been doing in 1821, who they were connected to, and then we wanted to see how they connected to our modern community. Now, one of the ways that we have done that is to take a look at St. Michael's Cemetery. St. Michael's Cemetery is our colonial era cemetery. The area around and in St. Michael's has been in use as a burial ground since the mid to late 18th century. And we don't have any marked grave sites that survive from that period, but we do have a number of sites that survive for people that were here in 1821. And the image that you're looking at now is the grave site of Dorothy Walton. And this is a commemoration event that was held by the Daughters of the American Revolution back in the 1920s. And that they went down to put a plaque in at Dorothy Walton's site. And it's a charming picture. Dorothy Walton lived in a period of time when you might not have thought women were much in the picture of things. But you think about Dorothy Walton and you realize that she was very much at the forefront of what was happening both on a national scale and on a state scale and a local scale. Her husband was George Walton, and he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Her son, George Walton, was the first Secretary of State for the state of Florida. She lived here for about 13 years. And she was indeed an eyewitness to the formation of our country, an eyewitness to the formation of our state, and as well as an intimate observer of everything that was going on in Pensacola. And we use St. Michael's Cemetery to not only look at people, but to look at how we can determine trade patterns, socioeconomic standing. We look at a variety of different ways of understanding our community better. What you're looking at in this slide is a modern map of the cemetery. You're seeing an aerial looking down, and you're seeing what at the lower part of the screen, you're seeing where approximately now right along the bay, that's Bayfront Parkway. So you're seeing historic Pensacola Village, our historic district, and you see a green outline. And this was how large the cemetery was in 1810. There was a resurvey of the town that was ordered by the Spanish. It began 1805, 1807 to identify lots that had been abandoned that could be reclaimed. And everyone had to say, I live in lot number 64 and I have for the past 20 years and here's the proof, in order to retain ownership of their lot. And the same was true for the cemetery. The Catholic Church presented a claim for the cemetery, and at that time they requested a claim of about 25 acres, and that was how the cemetery was surveyed. It was the first time a boundary had ever been put on the cemetery, and you can see the original plat that was drawn with the cross, and you have the skull and crossbones at the bottom. And if you look at these two, you'll see the blue line that shows the creek that was running through the bottom part of the cemetery. You see it on both images. And slowly but surely, the cemetery shrank in size. And so what we have today is 8 acres. And this is an 8-acre outdoor museum and green space that's in the heart of our urban environment. Now, we looked at how to identify the people who are in St. Michael's Cemetery that were also here in 1821. And Jennifer Melcher, an archaeologist from the UWF Archaeology Institute, has developed a storyboard that looks at all of the people that we can identify that have markers. Now, we know that there are a large number of people without markers in the cemetery, but we do have quite a nice number of people who actually have markers that survive. And so Jennifer has created, in partnership with St. Michael's Cemetery Foundation, a virtual tour. You can download it on your phone and just look at your phone, your iPhone, and walk through the tour, or you can take it with you down to St. Michael's. And from there, you can walk the tour and look at things on the ground. And so here are some of the things you're going to see on that tour. And I picked just a few to give you an idea of ethnicity in the cemetery and some of the things we look at here. You're looking at two markers, Jose Noriega Jr., and his father was Jose Noriega Sr., who came to Pensacola with Bernardo de Galvez in for the Battle of Pensacola. This was major turning point in the American Revolution, although it does not get much play on the national stage. The Galvez was protecting the western frontier. And by his actions, he actually thwarted the English from being able to use supply lines to the west of us. And so it actually was a huge contribution to the Americans. And Noriega was part of that force. His son is buried in the cemetery. We're not sure where Jose Sr. is buried, but many people were actually buried in New Orleans or in Cuba, in Havana. Going to Havana or New Orleans would, in this day and in their day and age, almost have been like driving to Gulfbreeze, Florida from Pensacola. It was a highway that ran with great frequency between Pensacola, New Orleans, and Havana. So not sure where Noriega Sr. is, but Noriega Jr. is in the cemetery. And he comes out of Spanish tradition. The tablet that you're looking at was carved in New Orleans by a carver over there. And these carvers were artisans. They were sculptors. They did beautiful work. This one you can see has been broken, and it's lying flat on what remains of the above ground tomb that this was mounted on, like a door almost. It was the closure tablet. So it would have been like the door opening into a large tomb. You're also seeing the marker for his mother, Victoria Lesassier, and she came out of French tradition from New Orleans. And she left a very vivid historic record. It is a ribbon trail that is fascinating to read, full of detail on what was happening in Pensacola, her life, and it also identifies a number of enslaved people. And her documents are one of the documents that are used to actually identify people that you're not going to likely see any other way. One of the things that we wanted to do with the sampler was actually identify enslaved people that do not have names. And several hundred have been identified that do not have names. We know they were here. We know that they were here because they are either numbered or they have maybe just a first name. And so we're hoping through the sampler to also give voice to them, to have someone that represents them and honors them in a way that we cannot quite look back and understand fully today. But in both of these markers would have been, both of them were carved out of New Orleans. Victoria Lesassier's is not signed, but it's very similar to Carver in New Orleans. The Americans that came in came in with a vengeance and right from the beginning. And much of what we know about what was going on in Pensacola, we know from the newspapers. The Spanish did not have a newspaper. They certainly had access both to newspapers coming out of New Orleans as well as Cuba. But they did not have a newspaper in Pensacola. They would have relied on news from these other areas. When the Americans came in, the first thing they did was set up the free press. And they meant to have it started as soon as the exchange took place. However, their printing equipment was delayed coming from Philadelphia. And so they were a month late in putting out the first paper. Now, the paper tells us all kinds of things. I've given you a tombstone here, a monument to the Kaiser family. And this is a wonderful example of not only the artisans at work. This was a carver out of Philadelphia that made the marker. The first person that died in 1822, what would have happened is one of the family members would have sent have sent an order to the east. If you were an American, you kind of went to the east. You went to where you were familiar with the merchandise. They would have sent a request for what they wanted for a marker with a ship captain, or maybe with one of the stores that were here in town, one of the merchants that were here. They would make their order. The order would go on a ship to wherever they were ordering their stone from, let's say in this case, Philadelphia, the order would be placed with the stone carver. The stone carver would have carved, and in this case, carved this piece in 5 different sections. If you look at this stone, it's just on the South Road. There are 5 different sections. You can think of this as a prefab, elegant prefab, but 5 different sections. It was then loaded onto a ship and it was shipped back to Pensacola. It took about 6, it depended on the weather, but you could be anywhere from 16 to 19 days to get from Philadelphia to Pensacola or Pensacola to Philadelphia. And so this would have arrived on a ship. You would have had local artisans that would have assembled it on site. And then here you have this beautiful marble marker that is hand carved with just lovely motifs on all sides. The Kaisers came in as merchants, and they were consignment merchants. And I've got a little ad from the paper in 1821 on one side, and it's just a small, gives you a small idea of what was coming in. Certainly they were coming in with all kinds of food stores. They were coming in the larger ones that we see, they're coming in with furniture, they're coming in with food, they're coming in with a lot of whiskey, wine, and spirits. And so these are things that people were wanting in Pensacola, and they were being supplied often from the Northeast. The schooners were coming in from the Atlantic seaboard. The other ad that is a later ad, but it shows you one of the ads for one of the carvers that was here in Pensacola in 1847. And these are very important because it tells us how much these stones cost. It tells you if you want Italian marble or if you want Eastern marble, how much you're going to pay for it and how much each letter is going to cost you. And then you also have to decide if you want something ornamental carved. And these are all done by hand. And this was an art. And you will see many examples in St. Michael's, exquisite works of art that were hand carved. We see after the invention of the diamond drill bit and the steam engine that we see a shift from marble, which is more easily hand carved, to granite, which was a very hard stone. And they are carving it with machines. And once that happens, it's a real shift in technology and fashion. And the hand carved markers, the carvers fall away and are overtaken by the new technology that comes into play. This is a postcard that I believe 1812 is the date on this. And it's got really charming little lettering on it. It says, St. Michael's Cemetery, given by the King of Spain 300 years ago. Well, that is obviously not true. But what is true is what you're seeing here, which is in the cemetery today. And you can see what the overgrowth was and what botanicals were growing in here to a large degree. You have metal fences, you have wood fences, you have very definite statuary that reflects the ideals of the Romantic era, when you were very much into nature, maybe more into nature than you would want to be in St. Michael's Cemetery in this image. But this was a period of time when people really expressed themselves beautifully in the cemeteries. And so you can visit this. This is the Simpson site, and the Bright site is next to it. These are 2 of the lovely classical sites in the cemetery. Cemeteries were indeed tourist destination sites in the early 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s, and all the way up to the mid 19th century. We see cemeteries as places people go. They go, they paint, they sit, they think, they read, and they walk, and they admire. And today we see in St. Michael's Cemetery, this is also a tourist destination. The people of Pensacola and of 1821 are also connected to structures in historic Pensacola Village. And in particular, one that I'm showing you here is this is a map of the historic district, and the green arrow points to a lot that was owned by a group of Frenchmen who came from New Orleans and they built an entertainment complex in 1805, and it was the Tivoli. And the Tivoli was based on an entertainment complex in New Orleans. And this was a very open and inclusive place for people to gather. And the Tivoli House had a number of owners through the years, but early on, two of the owners were Jose Noriega and his mother, Victoria Lasassier. And if you went to the Tivoli House, you would have been able to have something good to eat, something to drink. You could have attended plays in the ballroom. If you see the little round structure, that is a ballroom, and the little oblong structure is the tavern. And here is a drawing of the tavern as it would have looked with the sandy street in front of it. And then also what you're seeing is a photograph of artifacts that were recovered from a well that was associated with the trash deposits from the Tivoli House. And we are seeing coming out of there very utilitarian wares. You've got coarse earthenwares. You've also got tons of bottled glass. People were having a nice time sipping their spirits. We found oysters. There were oyster shell. There was domestic and non-domestic animal bones. There was fish. There were peach pits, and you see two little fish peach pits on the plate. But the artifacts reflected a commercial establishment. And this well is located just across the street from the reconstructed Tivoli house. The house itself burned, but there is a reconstruction of the Tivoli house in historic Pensacola Village on the same footprint. And across the street, there is a well, a water well that was associated with earlier occupations across the street, but was then used by the Tivoli House as a garbage site, a garbage dump. And what was recovered by students from what was then Pensacola Junior College and today Pensacola State College reflects a wonderful assortment of food. And although they excavated in the 70s, they did it with such meticulous effort that we're able to use all of their results today and have a really nice look at what people were eating and drinking at the Tivoli House. We do a lot of work with foodways because we see wonderful interaction between people as they not only the people themselves start to blend, but their cultural traditions start to blend. And foodways is a wonderful way for us to look at how different people interact. Now, the commemoration of the event itself that's going to take place on July 16th and 17th of 2021 is going to be something that we hope people will come to and actually enjoy. We've all been cooped up, and it's been wonderful to see people get out and about, and we're quite hopeful that they're going to want to come and actually mix and mingle just as they would have in 1821. So many people down in Museum Plaza in historic Pensacola Village, enjoying a beautiful day. Some of the events that are going to happen then are on Friday. There's going to be an African drum and dance workshop. There'll be one or two in Museum Plaza. You will have to register for this, but it will be free and open to the public. And this should be a wonderful experience to be able to participate in how people would have been dancing in Pensacola in our squares in 1821, and to be able to feel that West Africa and Caribbean influence that we see with people in Pensacola and how they would have expressed themselves in self-entertainment. There are going to be reenactors that will be in Fountain Park that will be reenacting the military presence in Pensacola at that time. So they'll be camped out down there, and that will be a really nice experience all the way around. And we have a kill boat coming. Now, most of the time we look at, bigger ships, but the kill boat was like the working boat for people in 1821 in Pensacola, because it could get up into the upper reaches of the Escambia River. And this is what people that were farming up there would send their produce down the river and down to Pensacola on. And so there are reenactors at this living exhibit that will talk about the role of the kill boat in early America. and in Pensacola and in Escambia County and in Florida. And so that will be I think, something that people will very much enjoy on Friday. Again, there's no charge for anything that's going on with this commemoration. On Saturday, this will be the formal ceremony and activities. And there's going to be a sunrise blessing by the Santa Rosa Creek. I'm sorry, I see my typo here. The Santa Rosa Creek tribe in Museum Plaza. And this is going to be open to the public, but there will be no filming or recording of any kind. This is a sacred ceremony to the Creek tribe, and we would not want to do anything that would disrupt what they will be doing. We are very honored to be part of it. Then people can just go eat breakfast and come back. And at 10 o'clock, we'll have a flag raising ceremony. There'll be speakers. There's going to be also African-American music and dancers, Hispanic performances with music and dancing. The UWF bands will be playing. One of the songs they'll be playing as the flag raises is the Star Spangled Banner. And this would have been the first time that many people in Pensacola or in Florida in general would have heard the Star Spangled Banner. It had only been written, I think, maybe 6 or 7 years before. And so this would have been the very first official playing of the Star Spangled Banner in Florida as it became an American territory. There's going to be a flyover, and there'll be an honor guard from the Navy. Reenactors will be there as part of the flag raising. There will be living exhibits throughout the historic Pensacola village. All of the houses will be open. There'll be a historical scavenger hunt. You will be given clues on the history and archaeology of the village, and you will go forth and find what you're looking for and turn it in. And then there will be booths and tents along the plaza, and different organizations in town will bring their mission to the public there. The food trucks, there will be about 4 or 5 food trucks that will be sprinkled around the village, and they too come with a twist. And so what we're doing is looking at making this all about people and connecting people from 1821 to the people of 2021, as we all really celebrate and recognize the diversity of our history and our heritage and what we share with people that came before us and what they bring to our community today as the actual founders of Pensacola and the founders of Escambia County, and of course, the original citizens once we become Americans. So we're hoping everyone will join in on this. If you've not been reading them, go to the Pensacola News Journal. They've been publishing weekly articles on different aspects of the 1821 community. These are being published in Pensacola History Illustrated. There's also, of course, the genealogy database of residents and the sampler. WSRE has 4 programs coming up beginning on, I believe it's the 27th of June. They are also doing a documentary on becoming an American territory that will air in the early fall. We're featured in Forum magazine. There are historic markers going up, both a state marker and local markers to commemorate different sites around town. And all of these are done with an eye to looking at everyone that was here, looking at everyone and the contributions that they made. And so we are very pleased to be involved in this, and we hope you come and join us. And with that, I'll take questions if you've got any.
Thank you so much, Margo. That was wonderful. I learned a lot with that presentation too. It looks like we do have one question in the chat box from Jess. She asked if there's a rough count of the number of people that chose to leave the city following the transition.
I don't know that they have that. I know we've been able to identify just a couple of them, and one is a Spaniard who was a civil servant here, and he was Prieto was his surname, and he was a civil servant. He was scheduled to leave. He had several children with a woman who's identified in the census as being mestizo. And so she was part native, and also probably had other blended ethnicities. But again, this is very important to us to be able to identify people's ethnicity, because often you're not able to do that, especially with Native Indians. Sometimes it was better for you to keep quiet about your ethnicity than it was to bring it forward. And he was one of the men who left, but he came right back. We know that he did because he left a will. And so he came back and then situated himself here. And in his will, he made sure, I mean, double, triple sure that his children, especially his daughter who had taken care of him, inherited his estate. All of these men that were of Spanish or French backgrounds, who were living with women who were either free women of color or enslaved women, and had families, in their wills, they made sure that people were free and that their estates went to their family. And so this is a little slice of looking at just the interaction, not only of family dynamics, but also of how you looked after your family.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and you might want to also check with Erin Renfro. You might send a question out to the Genealogical Society and ask if she can actually pinpoint that number for you, because she may have a better idea of number than I do. I just don't have the number.
Mhm.
But it was 3 ships. We had 3 ships to carry people away. So, a number of people
Good
went.
number. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that too, Margo?
Yes.
So I was actually looking into Mariana Prieto for the exhibit that's coming up in the Wentworth too. And one of the things that I saw in the census was she was the only one I could find that was listed as mestizo. Would that have been correct, or was it, because I know there are errors in the census as well?
There are, and there are several more people that also, if I'm not mistaken, well, you can list her, and of course you can list her children.
Mhm.
If you look at the census,
Yep.
her children would have also been, they would have also carried that ethnicity with them. And I want to think we've identified maybe 4 or 5 adult people that come out of mestizo tradition, or come out of native Indian tradition. And again, you pin it down with Erin Renfro. She was the senior researcher on this project, and she has really dug deep for everything that she's done. And I will say too, I know one of the things that you all are doing for the exhibit, and excuse me for not mentioning that, I didn't have it on my screen, but there will be a lovely exhibit in the museum, in the University Museum downtown, that looks at the 1821 community. And I know one of the things y'all are doing is kind of looking at where, when the newspaper talked about where something was, and when we are looking at different documents that we have that can pinpoint where they were, that we're then able to reconstruct the landscape. And that's one thing we've been doing for a number of years at the Archaeology Institute, is reconstructing who lived on what piece of property when. So that is such a wonderful aspect of what you're doing, is to look at where the footprints were, whose backyard.
Yeah, it's been a fun project for sure, but it's definitely confusing. There's a lot of people here. So, but thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions from Jennifer too. She asked, this is a good question, do we know the site of the transition? She said, it looks like the painting that you showed might have been more of a composite of several different places.
I think it was somewhat of a composite. And I think, because I do not believe, I would be surprised if the church that's shown there looked quite like that. I think what it was showing was the government building, the governmental building. And then what it was showing in the background would have been buildings. I was trying to decide if they were trying to show some of the barracks in the background, but some of the dates were off for when those disappeared off the landscape. So I'm really not sure. But where they would have exchanged, they would have walked out. They say that they walked out of the government house and, you know, crossed the open space and exchanged. So it was somewhere in the vicinity of, you know, over there in front of what we see as the museum in Ferdinand, or over, you know, it's in that area right around Plaza Ferdinand, bleeding into the museum and Museum Plaza. And where we're going to commemorate is in Museum Plaza.
And then Jennifer had another really good question. This is a good one for you, Margo. She noted that if the cemetery was originally much larger, it looks like parts of that area now have buildings on it. What studies have been done to identify burials outside the current boundary of St. Michael's Cemetery?
We have not, well, we use the newspapers again, because in the late 1800s, when they were doing a lot of utility work coming down on Wright Street in Tarragona, they actually uncovered burials there that were military in nature with Spanish coinage that was associated with them. And these were people that may have lost their lives in the Battle of Pensacola in 1781. And so there are people outside the boundary of the cemetery. We see this on British maps in 1778 as well in 1781, and these are British. And we don't see the enclosure of the cemetery until the Spanish actually draw a plat of what they're claiming. And I want to say too, you know, it's not unusual. Most cemeteries do have arbitrary boundaries. There are people that are, you know, kind of outside the boundary. We certainly know of one that we've identified outside the eastern boundary of St. Michael's Cemetery. And so when much of the building was going on, the infrastructure was going on in our community, first of all, people probably did not have any clue that there could be a cemetery other than, you know, that's unmarked up in that area. Many people, you did not have access to many of the documents that were in the British archives that would have shown this. That's relatively new to be able to do the deep kind of research that we can do, and most of it online, to actually come up with many of the historic maps that are going to help us. Now, we've had at the Archaeology Institute great success in reconciling the colonial maps to the contemporary landscape. And so we feel quite confident that where you see all those little crosses, we are seeing area where you had burial ground all up under there. And so it was definitely being used. That whole area was being used as a burial ground by both the British and then by the Spanish. And then the Americans.
Thank you, Margo. I do have, let's see, we've got one more question here too. This one's from Mary. She's asking if there were people of Basque people or people of Basque descent living in Pensacola.
I do not know. I don't remember seeing that identified in the census. So I don't know. That might have been something that would have been more specific. Many of the people that were, if they were from Spain, it says where they were from. And I don't remember seeing anything associated with the Basque. But we even had an Italian person here. So, I mean, they were pretty specific about where people were from and what regions of if they were, some of them are just from, say, Louisiana. Some denote that they're in more specific sites than that. Some are from the Carolinas, some are from Spain. And very few are noted to be from Mexico, which is unusual because we certainly had in our earlier colonial period very, very substantial populations that came from directly from Mexico here.
Well, thank you for answering all those questions, Margo. I'll just throw out too, you mentioned the events taking place on July 16th and 17th, which sound like they're going to be fantastic if everyone can be a part of them, or anyone here wants to be a part of them. There's also a calendar on the Visit Pensacola website with all kinds of events leading up to those dates related to the bicentennial celebration. I just put that in the chat box. We've been posting a lot of our upcoming events there as well. And I see that a lot of other organizations are doing the same thing. So if you want to celebrate before the 16th and the 17th, there's lots of opportunities to do so.
There are. I think that, and of course, this is all being said with paying close attention to any kind of steps that might be taken in terms of the pandemic situation. We feel like we're all going to be able to gather safely. And so it'll be a nice opportunity to do so. And we want people to be out and about. Let's take advantage of everything we have to offer here.
Yeah, totally agree, Margo. Totally agree. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I just want to thank Margo again so much for this awesome presentation and for answering all our questions at the end. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
And if you're interested, we do have another presentation coming up on July 1st that's going to talk a little bit more about the project that Jennifer Melcher with the Archaeology Institute was working on. She's going to come and talk about that and show us a little more detail about her work with the cemetery. So I'm really thrilled to have Jennifer do that as well. And that'll be Thursday, July 1st at 3:30 p.m. We're going to probably record that one as well. So if you can't join us on that day, you can catch it on our YouTube channel. And that's just Florida Public Archaeology Network. And if you came in a little bit late today and want to see the beginning of Margo's presentation, you can go there in a couple of days as well, and we'll put this presentation there. So thank you again. Thank you to everybody for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. I hope you get a chance to enjoy some of the celebration activities to celebrate the 200s and the transfer. And I hope we see you again soon for Zoom into Archaeology. Thank you all.
Oh, are we off, Nicole?
We are off.
Oh,